Hello again. Last time I did the followers, the leaders and the followers. The leaders were the evil against the good. Now, and the followers were the useless idiots or useful idiots who are actually unaware of the leaders being evil, but go along with it anyway. So I've covered the evil and good already, didn't take long. And now I'm doing the followers, so the majority of people. You have a few people at the top leading and the masses, the lumpen proletariat, the useful idiots at the bottom. And they are working under a spell. They've been hypnotized, they've been programmed. And what they're basically doing is to believe what they've been told, not because it's right, but because they've been told by people that they trust. Now, how they trust the people they shouldn't trust is another story, but they do. That's propaganda, basically, and hypnosis. But the trouble is, these people have got the cloud, like being drunk, of hypnosis, of programming on them. And I don't know a single way to get them out of it. In fact, the only way I've ever been able to do it is one-to-one. Just, people that know me and trust me and just listen to it. And they might pick up one fact, knowing that I'm not going to make it up or have a reason to lie to them. They may think about it, but in the end, there's no known treatment or cure. It's like a virus, but worse. But they can grow out of it. So people who vote at the moment are actually voting for the majority of people, whether they're awakened or not. So if the awakened people get in, then you get Trump and Brexit. And if the zombies get in, you get Biden or Trudeau or Macron. And it's all about understanding, because the thing is that you either see things clearly or not. Now, I've got my glasses on, and my left eye in particular on its own isn't very efficient until it's got its lens on, in which case it's perfect. Now, the thing is, it's the same eye, and it's just as capable of seeing as somebody without glasses at all, but it won't see unless you put the lens on. Now, what's happening is that these people who are hypnotized are looking at the eye chart, and all they see is climate change, disaster, lockdown, white privilege, Black Lives Matter, anti-fascists, and they go along with it. It's a mindset. There are very few people who subscribe to one of these things, and not all of them, because basically you're either stupid or you're not, to put it bluntly. So they take the whole package, the whole lot of lies, the whole lot of rubbish, critical theory, whatever you like to call it. Men can become women just by saying they are, not even by having disgusting cosmetic surgery to remove all their bits and bobs and turn their willy inside out to make a hole which is filled with bacteria for the rest of their lives, needs to be cleaned out with domestos. Anyway, that's the sort of thing it leads to. It's very dangerous, because these masses allow politicians say, well, you voted for it, you're going to get laws against misgendering. So if you call a man he, even though he's still got all his equipment and everything, and he wants to be called a she, you can get a criminal record in some countries. And that's just the start of it. And they'll soon be blocking anti-climate change websites and things. They're thinking of doing that, and possibly making climate denial a crime in certain places. And hate speech, well, we already have hate speech laws, as in inciting a crime that's been illegal for ages and ages, because it's wrong. Slander and libel, making somebody look bad because you're lying about them, that's wrong as well, and it's hateful. And quite rightly, it's against the law. But being rude to someone, just imagine, I got a criminal record. Why did you get a criminal record? Oh, I said somebody, I can't even say it now because I get a criminal record. Just think of the words we used at school in the playground in the 60s and 70s, if you're old enough to remember. Every one of those children would be rounded up and locked away for re-education now. But, calling someone a spastic or a Mongol, back in those days, it was what the doctors called them. And now they've had to change the meanings of the word. And the thing is that a Mongol or Mongoloid was a name for somebody suffering from Down syndrome. So you suffered from Down syndrome, and the person who suffered Down syndrome was called Mongol or Mongoloid because that was the term. And of course, they had to get rid of that, but there was no other term to replace it. So if somebody has Down syndrome, there is no word for it. Ditto with cerebral palsy. If you had cerebral palsy, the disease or the condition was called cerebral palsy, and the person suffering from it was a spastic. That was the name for it. So, 20 years of playground insults and oh, you can't call it that. Well, what will you call it? Oh, we haven't got a word for it, but don't call it spastic. So they've actually got two words, Mongol and spastic, which were the only words we had for people with these conditions. They haven't brought a new one in, because I suppose if they thought of a new one, within about a year, all the kids at school, even though they're not at school at the moment, so they're locked down, they do it online and use the words, and it would just take over, which is why the correct word for black people has changed roughly every 2 decades in my lifetime. It used to be Negro was the polite term in the 60s. That's right. Then in the 70s, it was coloured people. You could still use Negro, and in America, they still use it to describe themselves, but we're not allowed to for some strange reason outside America. And then it was black in the 90s, which is still just about okay. But if you say coloured now, they call you everything under the sun. Negro is virtually the same as spastic or Mongol, because it's just a word that for some reason, which nobody actually knows, because it's not a pejorative term, and it was actually used as a polite word to stop people using the long list of pejorative terms, and suddenly it just went out of favour. Now, changing goalposts is there not because the people care or want to be called certain things, because most people with cerebral palsy don't really mind what you call them if you're not being rude to them. It's the people above, the leaders, the evil leaders, who tell you what to do and make you do all these mental gymnastics not to say a certain word. I mean, can you imagine sitting here making a video and saying, well, there's a long list of words that are virtually banned. I mean, I used a word which means to slow down on Twitter. I got a week's ban the second I said it, because it picked it up in my news feed and recognised I'd used a word which is something used in chemistry to stop a fire, and they banned me for a week from using Twitter because I used a word which is a normal word. So that's where it's heading. But without the useful idiots, it couldn't happen, because when you get people ringing up LBC day in and day out wanting more lockdown, when it's, in fact, it's not really making any difference to the cases and didn't the last 2 lockdowns, and they still want it. They're driven by fear and stupidity. Climate change, fear and stupidity. They don't look at the history where the planet was warmer and better, or it was colder and everyone died. They just say, oh, well, Al Gore told us we're all going to die if there's no snow by 2020 and there's no ice in the Arctic. Well, the Arctic still has ice in 2020, and it snowed 2 days ago all over England. Our weather has not changed at all. And it probably never will in our lifetimes, because weather changes normally over very long periods, except when you're coming out of an ice age, and then you know about it, but we're not coming out of an ice age, so you won't know about it directly. There is a lack of common sense in people who are hypnotized. Basically, if you're hypnotized, you do as you're told. It's very difficult to make you do something you wouldn't do yourself, so you can't make a decent people commit crime. But I'll tell you what, there is an actual court case which says that if a woman has sex with you when she's hypnotized, it's consent, because she wouldn't have done it otherwise. So the fact that she was hypnotized and you asked her to do it doesn't matter, because they recognize that you can't really make someone do anything they don't want to. But being hypnotized, you can block out an awful lot of things. So you can make people believe there's not a number 3 or a certain day of the week or month or whatever, and they count, they leave out that number. And to them, it's perfectly normal and sensible. And, watch Paul McKenna, he'll tell you, oh, there's no number 3. What number's that? Oh, we didn't say it. It doesn't exist. Don't be silly. There's no such number as 3. And then they come out of it and they wake up. And everyone wakes up eventually. But unfortunately, we cannot rely on the people to wake up. It's all biblical. Everything, not just the Christian Bible, all the Bibles, all the holy books say the same thing. The rapture, everyone is going to be taken away up to the 5th dimension, as we now recognise it to be. And those who wish to stay behind, who still believe in climate change, will be left behind, and they can stop travelling and stop driving their cars and stop heating their houses and stop using coal. And they'll die of cold and starvation, all these other things, because they want to. The fact that nobody ever died from a warmer planet has no effect on them. You know, I can send diagrams so I'm black in the face on Twitter and Facebook, but the people who believe in it say, oh, it didn't come from a reliable source. All the science has changed since then. Oh, that's not completely right, or whatever. They just ignore it. So it's like they're dreaming, and everything in the dream is just different from anything they've ever seen before, because it's in the dream. They've lost their identity. They've lost their common sense. They are just in this mindset. Oh, you've got to believe in climate change or you kill babies. I've been accused of being a baby killer before. I mean, in fact, I've never met anybody in my life as obnoxious as climate change believers. They are the nastiest, most obnoxious people. They're worse than the Nazi people, because the Nazi people are actually quite calm and collected and reasonable. Say, oh, the Jews are the biggest scourge of the earth, but you know, this is just a problem we've got to deal with. It. They don't tend to throw insults at you directly. They've just got this very evil view. But as people, you know, you often talk to these people and they're perfectly reasonable and sensible until you discover they're a Nazi, because they don't talk about it straight away. Whereas the climate people, they'll start off by swearing and coming out with all sorts of hysterical nonsense, and then they'll call you every name under the sun, and then they'll block you. And that's what they do, because they have to block you, because I suppose maybe it's a good thing, because the weight of facts becomes too much for them. So they have to run away and hide, because maybe if the millionth straw goes on their back, it'll crack, and they'll say, hang on a minute, the sea level hasn't risen more than 12 inches in the last 200 years. Now, if the planet was warming up by more than 1 degree centigrade, it would probably be rising a lot faster, because you can measure the amount of ice that will melt per 1 degree centigrade. And believe me, the temperature has not risen enough to melt the ice any more than it did in the 20th century. So there's something clearly going wrong that they can't really get their heads around, because all the parameters, the proxies that we can see, we can't see the average temperature. In fact, the scientists can't. They make it up. That's a story for another day. But what's happening is these people believe, because somebody told them, that the planet is warming up. And not only do they believe that, they believe when it's going to get warm in 50 or 100 years. Now, that takes some doing, because if you think about it, fortune telling people the future is against most religions. For very good reasons. It can't be done. It's not possible. So there's a difference between clairvoyance and telepathy, which can be done because they're all in the present and the past, and telling the future, which can only be done if you can literally go outside this dimension and go on a different timeline. And even that's not reliable, because the timelines break up like a weather forecast. The further ahead you go, the more splits you've got. So it's not worth doing. I'll put it that way. It's not worth doing. And it detracts from the present. And people are saying, oh, when's this going to happen? When's that going to happen? When's the lockdown ending? We don't bloody know. Yet these clever people in NASA are telling you what's going to happen in a system which is the most chaotic, complex system outside the human brain in 50 and 100 years. And these schmucks listen to it and believe it. Oh, but the sea level's going to rise by 8 feet by 2100. Well, we know about it. Yeah, of course we will. Hey, how old will you be? Oh, I'll be 167 by then. Will you live to be 167? No, I won't. So how will you know about it? Fucked. These people are beyond unintelligent. They're actually anti-intelligent. So I would give them an IQ in the negative, in the minus figures, because they actually are full of disinformation. They actually think backwards. They're thinking everything that's wrong. So the reason all this crap comes as a package is because either you've got that package on you, you've got that mindset, that hood covering your head full of flies buzzing around and stopping you from seeing what's outside, or you haven't. So you're either drunk or sober. So those of us that are awakened either carried these beliefs in an immature, childish way and then woke up and we realised that governments can't print money and you actually get worse off if you work hard and they take more of your taxes, and if you work hard and keep more of your money. And then they wake up and say, oh, crikey, it's all very well in theory, but I never really thought about it till it happened. Very few people are capable of seeing obvious consequences in a linear system, such as driverless cars. So if you take a driverless car on an empty road and give it a route, it'll do what my little car did in the 60s and the 70s, where you had a punch card and you program it, so left, right, and everything else. This big plastic Lamborghini, I think. big white car about that big, and it would go boop, 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 boop. It was very clever. So it will go from A to B. But if a cat went out in the road, it did well, the train had a sensor. The car didn't have a sensor. The train had a sensor, and it would have to hit something before it moved away, which isn't good. You can adjust it so it stops when it sees it. And then when the hazard goes away, then it moves again. So presumably if an animal runs out or a child runs out, it will be able to stop. But that's about as far as it gets. Now, when you put it on a road, A, with traffic, and B, with multiple stops, then it's not so easy, because firstly, you've got where are you going to stop? Because sometimes it's very difficult for us to read parking restrictions because they're so complicated, and they come combined with yellow lines, 1 yellow line, 2 yellow lines, no yellow lines, but place up, and all this stuff that we have to learn gradually and work out. And now we've got roads that we can't use at certain times of the day. So there's quite a bit to process when you're driving, and that is when you want to stop. There are very few places where you're allowed to stop. Lots of room, but very few places where you're allowed to. And can it tell the difference between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock? That you can't park at 5, you can at 6, or which time the bus lane is usable. So these are things where it needs to be doubly programmed for the time, because the space is not one thing. You've got to have the space and the time. And that's one thing which just means more programming, but I suppose it's possible. But with other people who are not driving driverless cars, who do things which are not quite as predictable from time to time, if a person is driving a car and they see a person hovering in the street, which they do all the time, about 50 yards or 100 yards away, not sure, it's like they're drunk and they're reeling about, are they going to go into the road or stay on the pavement? And you always assume they're going to go into the road, because then you won't hit them. So you drive up to that area, and it's the same with a car, which is wavering about in the parking area, and it's moving. It's got its engine on, but you don't know if it's coming out, going in, manoeuvring, or going to pull out right in front of you. And with experience, you see these things and then say, well, I'm going to keep well away from that person, especially when you're a motorbike rider like I was, because it doesn't matter what they do, you're the one that gets hurt. So you have to keep away from these idiots. Can a driverless car pick up an idiot from 100 yards away? Probably not, because we know what idiots look like, whether they're drivers or pedestrians, because they do that. They faff around, and if somebody's faffing around either near a junction, in a parked car, or standing in the street, they're going to wander into the road, and you slow down and you keep out of the way, and you're prepared to stop, and you never have an accident because you saw it coming. Will the driverless cars be able to see that coming that far off? Will they be able to see that far off? Will they recognise it's a person, or will it just be a shape? Will they know the difference between a car 100 yards away and, something that isn't moving, or a car which is not moving but has its lights on, which means it might be moving after a minute or not, because somebody's about to take off, because the lights hopefully go on when somebody's using the car. They left them on when they're parked. So these are lots of things you have to consider. And then if you're doing multiple stops, this is even more fun, because firstly, if you are going from A to B, ultimately, most people, when they're doing a journey of say 5, 10, 15 miles, often stop more than once. Oh, I need some milk and newspapers. So you don't know where you're going to stop for milk and newspapers, because not everywhere is open or available to go to. And if there's no parking spaces at one shop, you'll wait for another one. How is your driverless car going to know that you want to go to a grocer's shop, but not that grocer's shop, any grocer's shop between here and there? It doesn't. How do you tell it? You can't. So basically, unless you are only going from A to B, your driverless car isn't really capable, unless you've got specific drops on the way, to know a sudden decision. Oh, I want to stop over there and go for a walk. I have a pee, or the things that you do when you're driving. None of that is possible with a driverless car, let alone, as I say, complex junctions, busy junctions, all the ones you see on the lights, camera action, whatever it is, crash action, with all the people in Russia and China smashing up each other because they're driving on the right. And, if you drive on the right, that's your own bloody fault. Of course, you're going to have accidents. You can't see what's coming the other way. Anyway, that's just a foreigner joke. But You know, when I'm looking at it, I'd be better off turning the TV round in a mirror image, because then I'd see what they'd done. Because to me, anyone driving on the right, I wouldn't know what to do at crossroads either, because I don't drive on the right. But you're not going to improve on that sort of record by having a driverless car. Anyway, those are the things to me that are obvious. And I always say to people, the Hutchison Rabbit was the other one. It was a telephone. It was a telephone that didn't have any wires, so it was mobile. It was before you could have an ordinary wireless mobile phone. So what they did is, because people couldn't wait till they got a mobile phone, Hutchison Rabbit was a little system where you bought a phone for hundreds of pounds, and it didn't have a phone number because there wasn't an actual system to ring mobile phones. It was before the days of mobile phones. But you could make calls from it as long as you were within a few hundred yards of a rabbit aerial. And they had a map of rabbit aerials and a little picture of a rabbit. So basically, you would pay a fortune to make the calls as well, because you paid a fortune to buy and rent the phone, fortune to make the calls. And I said, well, there's a slight problem here, because people who are, you know, desperate for a mobile phone, if they need to make a phone call out, they go into a phone box and know what it's going to cost them, know where the phone box is, don't pay any rental for the phone because it belongs to somebody else. They just use it. And if somebody wants to phone you, you've got more chance than phone you in a phone box to phone you back, because it's got a phone number and they can ring you back. These little handheld things couldn't phone you back because they only made outgoing calls. So of course they went bust within a very short time, because they weren't providing a service. And what you could do with them was much more expensive than what was already there. So it's obviously going to go wrong. They still did it. Somebody still put millions and millions of pounds into this thing and all the advertising, because they weren't sensible enough to see it was going to go wrong. Whereas I was, because I've just got a reasonable IQ, and anybody with a reasonable IQ should have seen it. The bank should have seen it. The investors should have seen it. They never did, because they were hypnotized. They were useful idiots. So do not do what Hutchison Telecom did. Do not allow the government to fool you and tell you that if you don't turn your heating down, stop eating meat and eat insects, and only drive when it's absolutely necessary, that the climate's going to be better. Because using the same principles on a slightly more complex level, because the climate is complex, so it took me much longer to work that one out, was bullshit than the Hutchison Rabbit. But all you're doing is using the same formula over and over again at higher levels to work out the same thing, which is all I had to do. And there's plenty of facts about the climate that we know, because there's, you know, thousands of years of history. You know, the Romans did actually produce wine, and there were wine bottles and grapes and seeds and things. And we know that it takes a certain temperature for that wine to be produced. And it was in the north of England and Iceland and Greenland. So clearly it was an awful lot warmer there than it is now. Did anyone flood? Did anyone become a climate refugee? Did anyone, I don't know, walk out of their house and fall in a puddle so deep that they drowned in it? Not really, no. They did quite well. The food was greater, there was less requirement for energy, and there were fewer wars, and people didn't die so quickly because you die of cold. So if you've been exposed to a cold temperature for a certain amount of time, everybody will die. You can't survive. Whereas a natural warm temperature, there are very few temperatures under about 100 degrees or more where you'll even get sunstroke. You won't be very well if you're exposed to them for a long time, but only the sick people and the old people will die or become ill from higher temperatures. But everyone dies from lower temperatures. And that's a known fact. Yet they're trying to protect you from warm temperatures. Doesn't make sense. So hopefully, like a headache, it will go away on its own. You don't need everybody to wake up. You don't need half the people to wake up for us to be free. You just need enough people, 20-30% of people, to reject this stuff, and somehow get enough of the middle ground, the people that don't know or care either way, to go along with you. because they haven't been hypnotized. They're not awakened, but they're not hypnotized. So you just get enough of people who don't really care about politics, and they'll vote one way or another and not even look at the policies, just do it because it's a knee-jerk reaction because they've always voted that way. But they're useful generally because at least they're open to some sort of changes, and something changes, and the lockdown is a good one because every month of lockdown more people get fed up with it, and out of those people that get fed up with it, they're saying, well, the cost benefit analysis of this lockdown means that the suffering it's producing for everyone in Britain is worse than what would happen with the virus, because we've had nearly a year now to see what the virus does, and the lockdown is actually making everyone suffer. And only 10% of people get long COVID, and a small percentage, well under 1%, die from it, which makes you think, well, it's not as if we haven't got other diseases. And it's not as if the other diseases we have got are very hard to get, because they're not. Up till the 70s, people got all the diseases on earth because we didn't have vaccines for anything except polio and whooping cough and TB. Yeah, a few really nasty ones. But all the other things, we just got them. And we survived them, even though you can't get mild measles or non-symptomatic measles. It's a very serious illness. And nobody gets away with measles. But we didn't lock down because of it. Didn't lock down because of scarlet fever. We didn't lock down because of whooping cough because they haven't got a vaccine for it yet. And we passed it on, and people in school, there was one day when there was nobody in my class because we all had mumps. You can get nasty things from mumps, but we survived it. Chickenpox, German measles. Chickenpox never leaves your body. You've got it for the rest of your life. You get shingles sometimes. Can't do a bloody thing about it. There's no HCQ or anything else or vaccine for it. You just get it. I mean, it's part of being an animal or a plant or a living thing that you get diseases. So people are waking up with the lockdown that they are discovering that their life has been made worse by the government, and they're looking at the benefits that are coming out of it, and they're seeing this huge rise in cases a month after we've been locked down. They're saying, well, hang on a minute, the lockdown is still going on, worse than before, but nothing's changing. There are loads of deaths, more people are dying than the last lockdown. Maybe we can't control the virus. So if we can't control the virus and wearing masks and all these other things, why are we doing it? That's the question. And these people say, well, obviously, I can't think of a good reason why we do it compared to the alternative, which is isolating the people who are at risk and making sure they don't get it if you can, which they never did because they put people in care homes who had it from hospitals and didn't care. So it makes you think that their plan is very different from what they're saying it is, because they are saving a lot of money in pensions now because old people are dying off quicker. It's not even cynical to say that, because if you listen to my thing about evil, you'll understand that the evil people have no conscience at all. They don't care if people die because they're not interested. That's why the wind turbines kill loads of birds. And they say, well, it doesn't matter because we're getting 40% of our income when the wind turbines aren't going around, because the agreement we've made is we get paid whether they're working or not. So who wouldn't have wind turbines? I mean, being paid to do nothing is bad enough. Being paid to kill birds is even worse. So, that's evil for you. Just in case you've forgotten what evil was, that's evil. And they've chopped down 15 million trees in Scotland to make wind farms. So it doesn't make sense when you think that the trees are the things that produce oxygen and take out CO2. So, by their actions, they prove their words are rubbish. So in a miracle, saving the soul is a miracle. My talks will wake up one person. I never expect to change anyone's views. All I do is I train people who already know this stuff to communicate it and to understand it better. But I never expect anyone to believe me who doesn't already believe me, because that's not how people think. I can't think of more than one or two people in 20 years on the internet who's ever listened to a word I've said about anything where I've had the facts and they haven't. But at least they know that their their opinions are being challenged, their so-called facts. Because if you don't challenge them, they think everyone agrees with them. So the best I can do is say, no, I don't agree with you. I'm just voting against your belief, thank you very much. Don't engage with them if I can help it, but don't vote with that lot. Vote with the good people, vote with the sensible people, the awakened ones. So in the end, we'll be divided into two. The awakened ones, apparently, when we get to enough numbers and beat the system, will leave their playground of kindergarten children who can't tie up their laces and need nappies, and the grown-ups will have their grown-up place to be nice to each other and not call you racist every time you talk about anything connected with life, maths, milk, being punctual, education. They're all racist according to the critical theorists in American universities. They're the evil ones, and the useless idiots, the morons who follow it, are the zombies who are not awakened. And the people who understand it are awakened, and everything is clear, and they are seeing through the clear lenses, looking at the same material, but seeing it clearly and being able to read the lowest thing on the eye chart. So I think that summed it up nicely. I hope my microphone worked this time, otherwise I've done it all for nothing. Thank you and goodbye.